You have all seen those disturbing pictures of young kids who are starving in Somalia or maybe playing in the slums of Calcutta or living in another slum in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And if you have a heart, and I'm sure you do, your first reaction was probably, how could I fix that? Is there something that I, as a member of a rich country, could do to alleviate poverty in the third world? Or maybe it's fixable, but not by me.
How come? How did we get there? Was it always like that in world history?
Well, what are the historical roots of poverty? Based on that, what are the solutions going forward?
These are the answers that we will try to get today. So the short answer to the question, why are some countries poor or rich today? Well, maybe it's some environment, or it's the legacy of the colonial era, or it is bad governance in the more recent time.
And I won't go over those three issues again because we already had a video about the matter. Today we are going to focus on the fixes to those problems.
What kind of solutions could you provide? Leaving aside the environmental factors, which are a bit difficult to change. If you say the colonial legacy is a problem, the people responsible for fixing the mess that they created would be the rich former colonial power. And this has led to calls within the UN, for example, asking richer countries to donate more in the form of foreign aid to poorer countries. The UN set a very specific target of 0.7% of GDP that the rich countries should donate annually in the form of foreign aid to poorer countries. And that's been around as a goal since the 1970s. Not every country matches that. The US actually spent far less than that, and most of the money given by the US goes to places like Israel that are not poor. But some countries, like in Scandinavia, are more generous and spend about 1% of their GDP annually as foreign aid. Overall, this has been done on a fairly large scale since the 70s and hasn't proved too successful, and a bit dubious about the impact of foreign aid. When we talk about Haiti, we can discuss that in greater detail.
But I still want to give you the basic criticisms that I and others have levied against foreign aid. One, foreign aid has a way of competing with local production. For example, if you send a lot of bags of rice that are surplus rice from the US, it seems like a good way to alleviate hunger in Haiti. On the other hand, in Haiti, as in many other poor countries, a vast bulk of the people are farmers. And so if you have rice that is donated by the US for free, how can local people compete against that? So that creates unemployment among farmers, and that's kind of counterproductive in that regard. A second problem would be that a leading cause of poverty in the third world is bad governance, and foreign aid does not fix that issue. In fact, it could contribute to the leaderships of those countries that are the problem in the first place. For example, in Haiti, foreign aid really started to pick up in the 1970s at a time when two dictators were in place, Papa Doc and later on his son, Baby Doc, and they used that money to enrich themselves. And so in a way, you are propping up a regime, the corrupt regime of Baby Doc, by giving him money through foreign aid. A third and more profound issue is the neo-colonial nature of foreign aid. Remember when we talked about the white man's burden back in the 19th century and how white people from Europe were colonizing countries in Africa because they saw that black people could not handle their affairs on their own? Well, in a way, foreign aid is based on the same premise. It is well-intentioned, and a lot of people that are promoting foreign aid are kind of liberal do-gooders and they mean well. But in a way, it is still about, let's go in a country and not trust the local people to do what's right. And I'm going to run their schools, run their hospitals, run their food programs in their stead. So there's something profoundly wrong about that, at least in my opinion.
On a different tack, Bono, the singer for U2 in Ireland, has made calls for debt forgiveness. The notion being that some poor countries have fairly significant national debts of several $billion, and so you have poor people making $1 a day paying interest on a debt that goes to some rich bank in Europe. So just cancel those debts, and then it will allow the poor countries to start from scratch. On a slightly different tack, some countries have also called for reparations and restitution. A classic case would be that of Haiti, which has demanded that France pay back some of the money that it exacted from Haiti during the Haitian War of Independence or shortly thereafter, which allegedly put Haiti into serious debt. And so these would be paid back with interest by France to Haiti. Other countries in the Caribbean, from the British Caribbean, have also made calls for Britain to send money to kind of atone for the sins committed during the days of sugar plantation in the Caribbean. And generally, several countries in Africa that were victimized by the slave trade back in the 18th century made a call at the Durban conference in South Africa in 2001, asking for richer countries that used to be involved in the slave trade to pay some reparations. And there were also calls for descendants of slaves in the US suing the US government, demanding some payment for like lost wages from their ancestors. So far, those various calls related to the Atlantic slave trade and slavery have not been successful, but they're all based on a slightly different call for reparation that was made in the 1990s by descendants, or at least survivors, of the Holocaust that had to work as slave laborers for Nazi Germany in concentration camps in World War II. In that case, they sued some German companies or German government and successfully and got several $billion. So that's the reason why you have all these calls for reparation and restitution. The situation is a bit different in the sense that in the case of the Nazi slave laborers, some of them were actual survivors, and so you have a direct competition to a direct victim. When you start talking about reparations for crimes that were committed 200 or 300 years ago, things get a bit complicated because the victims have long since passed away, and so have the perpetrators. So you have to talk about descendants, long-time descendants of some of the perpetrators paying money to long-time descendants of some of the victims. And with high rates of intermarriage between planters and slaves, oftentimes it's the same person on either side of the bargain. So it's an ongoing debate. I tend to be quite dubious, but then I come from a country, France, and I live in another country, the US, that would be expected to pay, so I might be a bit biased. But I tend to think that we should let bygones be bygones. I am not going to sue Genghis Khan for all the terrible things he did in the year 1200s. But that's a matter for debate, and so have fun in the comment section. Just keep it civil, please. Getting back on track to various solutions to poverty, if you think that the dependency theory is to blame and unbalanced trade, one solution would be fair trade. And if you go to a coffee shop in, say, a liberal area of the country, like Seattle and Washington, oftentimes on the menu you'll notice that they only sell fair trade coffee. And you might have asked yourself, what is that? What is fair trade coffee? Well, it means willingly paying above prevailing world prices so that you give a living wage to the farmer that actually produces the coffee, say in Guatemala. Because when you buy a $4 cup of coffee at Starbucks, only maybe 10 cents of it goes to the actual price of the coffee. The rest of it is paying the baristas and the rent of the location, the profit for the corporation, and advertising and so forth. So it would not be that complicated to pay double prevailing world prices, 20 cents for that coffee instead of 10 cents. But would make a world of a difference to the farmer that gets paid doubled. And that's not in a handout in the terms of foreign aid. It's actual money for a service that they provide, the coffee. So that's the concept of fair trade. Now let's shift a bit to a very different analysis if you think that bad governance would be the main source of the problem. In that case, just paying foreign aid or forgiving the debt is not the solution, because it would just be throwing more money at the problem. If you already have a corrupt government and you throw more foreign aid at that government, it will not fix the problem. It might actually backfire. So in that sense, what solution would be offered? Well, these would be more from within a conservative, pro-capitalist environment, where the solution is to open your borders, carry on free trade, export goods based on your comparative advantage, privatize companies, and basically follow the rules set forth by Adam Smith and David Ricardo. That was embraced a lot by countries in East Asia, the so-called Asian tigers, and we actually will have a video about them. And this would be more the agenda pushed by agencies like the IMF or the World Bank, or more conservative forces in the US or in Europe.
These solutions are not perfect. It usually takes a while, sometimes decades, for countries to lift themselves out of poverty. And there are some growing pains. If you are a poor country trying to export your way out of poverty, that means using the one thing that you have a good comparative advantage for, and that would be your low wages. So that involves sweatshops and so forth for a whole generation. On the other hand, these methods have been proven to work. So on the one hand, you had countries like Haiti that have received foreign aid for decades and are still very poor today. On the other hand, one of the great stories of our time is the fact that over the past 20 years or so, billions of people in East Asia have been lifted out of poverty, specifically in China. We'll cover that more next time.
I want to finish by focusing on two more out-of-the-way solutions that have been offered in recent years. The first one is a concept called workers' remittances. You might not know the word, but I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the concept. When you travel to an immigrant neighborhood in New York City, Los Angeles, you'll see a lot of bright yellow and black signs that say Western Union here. And you will see the same sign whenever you go to a rural area of Mexico that might not have good access to electricity or anything otherwise. This is just for wiring money back home. And it's because we have such a large immigrant population in rich countries that they tend to save money and then wire it back home to help, the abuelita back in Mexico. And as a result, you have a big outflow of money from rich countries to poor countries, which in many ways will dwarf the amount of foreign aid. And so that's one way that you could balance a bit of the losses due to the brain drain, and the way you are losing some of your best and the brightest. But there will be some cash that goes back, and cash that will go directly to people in need at the bottom of the pyramid, straight from person to person. Another solution that has been provided would be one offered by Mo Ibrahim, who is an interesting figure. He's from the Sudan, one of the poorest countries in the world, but he would be one of the richest people in the world because he did very well in the cell phone business in Africa, and decided to use some of that money to try to improve the continent where he was born. Created the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and as a businessman, his solution or his experience of why there is poverty in Africa is all based on the bad governance theory, that it was difficult for him to do business, that he had an environment that was just difficult to penetrate. So he wants to push people in Africa, especially the political class, to improve, become more democratic, and most importantly, not hang out in power forever until they're in their 80s or 90s, as say Robert Mugabe did in Zimbabwe. So the purpose of the foundation is to give a prize, which is very generous. I think it's $5 million. Not for you, it's for any person in Africa who gets elected by democratic means in the country, serve out their term in office, or terms if the constitution allows it, and then at the end leaves out peacefully, and you have a peaceful transition of government to the next person. That's something that seems a bit obvious, at least in the US. That's usually the way it works, but not so much in Africa. And in fact, many years the prize has gone unclaimed. And so more generally, there's an effort to try to encourage better governance within Africa, less red tape, more open borders, an environment that is more conducive to business. I announced 2 last things. In fact, I'll make it 3. I forgot to mention Mohammed Yunus is also important. This one is from Bangladesh, and he noticed that in this very, very poor country, a lot of the time, the poor people cannot get ahead, not because they don't want to work or don't have ideas to do, but because they don't have access to capital. To develop a business, you need access to capital. But a poor woman from a marketplace in Dhaka in Bangladesh cannot go to a regular bank and ask for a loan for $1,000 because people will just laugh her out of there. She doesn't have collateral, she doesn't have a history of credit, she doesn't look the part, and who is going to bother with a $1,000 loan? It's not worth the paperwork. So Mohammed Yunus began what is called micro-lending, where you would create a kind of a commune or co-op among the market women. It's often very female-oriented, in, say, a marketplace in Bangladesh, and they all contribute to the pot, and one of them will propose a project after contributing for a few months and say, I want to borrow money to buy a fridge so that I can go from selling fruit on the market to selling meat. And if the project sounds good and it's evaluated by the peers, then she'll get the money, which is usually pretty small, $500, $1,000, and that will make a world of a difference because this way she will not have to turn to loan sharks. So that system turned out to be surprisingly effective at combating poverty. It is very, very popular with conservatives because it's all a market-based solution that does not require government aid. Also popular with liberals because it is all about empowering women and combating poverty. And eventually Mohammed Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize as a result. So that's it. These are the different solutions that I can outline as a way to combat poverty. In the next few videos, we'll focus in greater detail on some countries that did well, and that would be the East Asian tigers, other countries that did very poorly, and that would be the Congo and Haiti. See you next time.